况下要做 IQ test， 就是他好像提到那个小朋友如果小于10岁的话，那他10赫兹太低，好像在那个10赫兹以下是 OK 的。但是如果是10岁以上，它太多应该是要高于10赫兹。然后它如果没有的话，这个时候就要去做一下 IQ test， 可能怀疑是不是有一些智力上或是脑部上的问题。大家知道 peak alpha 是什么意思吗？大家知道 peak alpha 是什么意思吗？就是刚刚大家可以看到那个脑波，对不对？它每一个出现那个中间是1秒钟，所以你要知道哪一个波，就是去算那个1秒里面有几个波形。如果有4个波形，就是那个西塔波。那如果是8个波就是阿尔法，所以它是用那个出现中间有几个波来当它的那个频带。然后 peak 阿尔法的意思就是说，可能你把那个频谱截出来之后，它会是像一个频谱的部分。那我想要知道说，在这一段时间，比如说阿尔法是8到12，那哪一个，比如说8赫兹、9赫兹、10赫兹、11、12，哪一个是在那个频谱的最高波，那个叫做 peak 阿尔法。比如说我最高的那个波是在第10赫兹的地方，所以10赫兹就是我的 peak 阿尔法。
那个 peak 看的是正负，是
对，它就是看你振幅哪一个最高，那它对下来是在哪一个 peak 值。那如果没问题，我们就请讲师继续。
So is it clear about the peak alpha frequency? All right, so let's talk some neuroanatomy. Now you have a basic understanding on the brainwaves, okay? Enough to have somewhat of a judgment when a client comes in and you see the delta, you see the alpha, and you have an idea of an assessment to make and what to suspect in terms of their cognitive behavior, and their performance, and their behaviors, and their health. So now, the other thing we need to know is what part of the brain does what. So for you to have a good assessment, it's very important to know what are the functions of those areas of the brain, and depending on what the brainwave is presenting, and the morphology of the brainwave, and the pattern of the brainwave, then you can have a better idea. You can have a better idea of what to suspect and how to intervene. All right. So this is your 1020 system, and obviously it's got more than the 19 channels that we use. But the 19 channels we use normally FP1, FP2, F7, F3, F6, F4, and F8. So the ones with the with the highlighted colors are the ones we use for 19 channel assessment and training when we do neurofeedback. Right? And it's called 1020 because these sides are either 10% or 20% distant from one or the other. So that's why it's called the International 1020 system, because it's either going to be a 10% difference or a 20% difference. Okay? And the nomenclature is just to make things easy for us. So the letter is going to talk about the lobe or the part of the brain, and the number is going to talk about what hemisphere. All right? So FP1 is for frontal pole. That's your prefrontal cortex. It's above the left eyebrow and above the right eyebrow. So it's not prefrontal cortex spelled backwards. It's frontal pole. Okay. 1 is your left hemisphere. 2 is your right hemisphere. So it's the same location, just different hemispheres. F7 is going to be your Broca's area. Somewhere around here, on the left side. And then F8 is going to be the same region on the right side of the brain. Okay? Now, Z is the midline, it's the vertex. So FZ is going to be your midline frontal lobe. CZ is going to be your sensory motor cortex, the midline, and then PZ is going to be your parietal mid. All right? So that's the convention we use. So when you talk to your mentor or talk to a colleague and they're describing a protocol, you're going to use a CZ to T3 montage with linked ears, and you're going to uptrain 12 to 15, and you're going to suppress 2 to 10. That's the language we speak in neurofeedback. So they're not going to tell you need to suppress alpha, theta. They're going to talk about the frequencies, and they're going to talk about the brain sounds. And the way you learn them is by just repeating them. The more neurofeedback you do, the easier it is for you to remember this. Okay? And this is the Brodmann area that relates to that site. Okay? Brodmann areas from Corbinian Brodmann, who was a physiologist, who had a lot of time in his hands, and he studied the brain and the functions of those areas. Okay? So each of those areas has specific functions that are relevant for our behavior and our performance. So for instance, if I go back for a second, FP1 and FP2, it's Brodmann area 10. So executive functions, memory, decision making, all those things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder with the bibliography for this. Okay, and I'm going to send you a book that is free distribution that talks about Brodmann areas and functions, so you can have that. So I'll send it to Paul, and then Paul will, I guess, send it to Dr. Lynn, and she'll distribute it to you. And I'm going to send you also one from one that talks about medication and the EEG, so what medication does what to the brainwaves, and different ones that you can have, which are free distribution that will help you with your reading material. So we use the 10-20 system and the Brodmann areas as the basics, as basis for our training and intervention, because that's how we know where to place the sensor and what functions we want to optimize. And here's more of a layout with different colors. So the ones in yellow are your executive functions. So it's Brodmann area 44, 45, 46, 10, 9, etc., etc. Right? And I can send you this in color too. Now in the purple, you got your motor functions, 8, 6, 4, 7, and then so on and so forth. For sound, for emotional regulation, for vision. So it gives you a good breakdown of what Brodmann areas handle what function, and that's good for you to remember as well. So then you start connecting the dots and saying, oh, okay, so this guy has a lot of delta or theta F7. So that means that his speech is, Brodmann area 10 or 45, which is language. That means, that's going to be compromising the language. And when we look at the EEGs later, this will make more sense. So this is just a touch on. Now, LH means left hemisphere, and right RH, right hemisphere. Okay. So we have our frontal cortex and prefrontal cortex. FP1, FP2, FP3, those are FP1, F3, and F7 are going to be your left hemisphere, right? So odd numbers are the left hemisphere. Even numbers are the right hemisphere. Right? Odd numbers are your left hemisphere. Even numbers are your right hemisphere. So for this, it's going to be working memory, concentration, executive planning, positive emotions. So that's FP1, that's F3, and that's F7. Okay, that's some of the functions from that area. We're going to break them down more specifically later on. Now, the right hemisphere is going to be episodic memory, social awareness, attention, and judgment. So in the beginning, because you don't know this, and it's hard to remember because there's a lot of information, right? What you do is you look at the EEG and then you refer to your material. So that's perfectly fine. You go, oh, okay, so there's a problem with F7. That's Brodmann area such and such. Oh, so you have problems with this, and that. Now, the more you do it, the easier it's going to be to remember. And then you're going to know what Brodmann area does what. It just takes time. and repetition. Okay? So don't worry about not knowing it now and not understanding the full picture now, because it takes time. The more you do it, then, you know, in 10 years, some of you are going to be traveling around the world lecturing like I do, and then you're going to know it. You're going to remember it, because you've done it over and over and over again. Okay? So what problems and considerations we need to have with prefrontal cortex on the left side, depression on the right side, anxiety. So activation, more activation on the left hemisphere is more depression-like. Activation on the right hemisphere is more anxiety-like. Okay? Especially social anxiety, being withdrawn, not wanting to hang out with people, having few friends, choosing to stay at home alone because it's too much to talk to people, things like that. Anxiety on the right hemisphere, and then same as fear on the right hemisphere, and also poor executive functions. So planning something, starting something, not finishing it, trying to do trying to do many things at the same time, being disorganized, all those things are executive functions. So that's the problems and considerations of that. Now, we have F7 to T3, which would be your Broca's area. That's this right here, okay? And what do you see in those? Dyslexia, you can see poor spelling, you can see poor reading comprehension, poor verbal comprehension, okay? Now, Wernicke's is going to be T5. Okay, so you want to write it down so you can make a note. It's Wernicke is going to be your T5, okay? So T3 being above the ear, T5 being a little cuddle, okay, which is going to be the temporal parietal junction, okay? So T5 is Wernicke's, and that's verbal understanding, your dyslexia, your poor spelling. So people with problems at F7, you're going to see tip of the tongue phenomenon. You have the word at the tip of your tongue, but it doesn't come out. So you know what do you call this? And somebody has to say brain. You go brain. Okay, right. So you don't know the word. Your brain knows the word, but it cannot utter the word. Okay, and or either if somebody doesn't remind you, 3 days later you go, oh, it was brain. Okay, so tip of the tongue phenomena, F7. All right, and T3. Now stuttering, stammering. T3, F7. Okay. Speaking with a lisp. Speaking like this with a lisp. It's also F7, T3. Okay, so tip of the tongue phenomena for getting the word. It's word production. It's your A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. All right. And T5 is going to be more of on the memory side of things. Okay. So if I tell you guys, if I tell any of you, okay, I want you to walk out the room, go down the street, go to the supermarket across the street, and get us coffee. Get us coffee and donuts, right? And if you have problems with T5, and you have problems with this region of the brain, you're gonna get up, you're gonna get out the door, you're gonna grab your cell phone and go, Santiago, what was it you asked me to call to buy for you? So I forgot. So if you don't write it down, it's gone. Okay? So it's a problem with short-term memory, and it's a problem with long-term memory. The information doesn't go into long-term memory. So it's not consolidated enough for you to remember. Or it's the kind of client where you tell them something and they do the complete opposite of what you tell them. A case that happened to me. This 13-year-old comes with his mom. And we do the qEEG, and he's got a lot of activity at T5. And I start explaining what that means, and the mom goes, I have the example for you. So yesterday, they live in a tall building, and they live on the 20th floor or something, and she's got a small garden outside. And he was gardening with me, and I took the tools away when it finished, and I told him to put them away, and he threw them into the garbage. So that's a perfect example of a problem with T5, memory understanding, verbal understanding, and consolidation, okay? So for the midline, cognitive flexibility, cooperation, attention, motivation, morals, OCD, tics, perfectionism, and ADHD. So with cognitive flexibility is a stubborn person. So it's my way or the highway. I'm the only one who's right. Whatever I say goes. Nothing else is nobody else is right. So it's very hard for these people to accept other people's opinions and to empathize with other people. It's the kind of client that says no to everything. All right? And it's also personalizing things. They see everything as a personal attack. Everybody's against me. You don't love me. The world is against me. Everybody's stupid. I'm the only smart person in the world. So it's the kind of people who has a really, really hard problem with being flexible, being open-minded, being empathetic to other people. And in cooperation, it has to do with oppositional defiance. So it's a kind of person who has a problem following authority. So it's that really, really rebel kid whose parents tell him no, and he does, and he goes yes. Don't do that. I don't care, I'm going to do it. And they have problems with authority. Attention, obviously with ADD, being inattentive, so being drifted away, spacing out, being distracted, daydreaming, all those things. It has to do with motivation, okay? And it has to do with motivation, especially in depression. So, because when you have a really active cingulate cortex for depression, what's the loop? I'm depressed, I'm depressed, I'm depressed, I'm depressed. So therefore, the motivation is not there. Or, oh, I'm stupid, I'm lazy, I can't do this. Once the thought enters your head, you dwell on it, and you dwell on it, and you beat it to death. Well, your motivation is going to go down, and your morals too. So this is for the antisocial type clients, the psychopathic type clients. Or the oppositional defiance. They have no morals. They just go around hurting people without a care in the world. These are the people who hurt, or these are the people who are so severely traumatized that they go around insulting people and they don't care. They just don't care. There's no filter for them. There's no dimmer that can graduate, that can dim and adjust to being aware of the consequences of the words and actions. It's OCD, definitely OCD, so the people stuck in an obsession or a compulsion. It's the tics, the visual tics, the verbal tics, the motor tics. It's with being a perfectionist. If you're OCD, you want to be a perfectionist. And you don't have to be OCD to be a perfectionist. It could be a dysregulation, and it's just, if things don't work their way, it's very frustrating. So, it's the client that has a vision of the world, and if the real world doesn't meet that vision they have in their mind, well, they go nuts. It's really hard for them to accept. And obviously, it's involving ADHD. So for CZ, we train CZ to train attention, to train motivation, to train compulsion, tics, and perfectionism. So, training FC, CZ is a good protocol to help with cognitive flexibility, to help with attention, to help with being more open-minded. Now, the best way to do it is obviously you can do some kind of neurofeedback training plus some kind of cognitive intervention. Thought reframing or something like that. Cognitive restructuration, which is what you do in cognitive behavioral therapy. So you make the mind and the brain flexible enough, and then you provide new information that a person can use. So it's always good to combine those. So for manual dexterity, especially the writing, one of the things that I do whenever I have a kid with a learning disability or ADD is I get a writing sample, right? And I get the writing sample, we do the training, and we take another writing sample, and usually the writing improves. The quality of the writing, improves dramatically in kids. And it's because the motor cortex is involved. So you can train facial paralysis after a stroke, OCD, and poor writing. So the quality of the writing can be improved. And that's one of the other things parents tell me. And Santiago, we're noticing his or her writing is much better. It's pretty. So that's one of the other gains that you get. You're not looking for it, but you're getting it as a byproduct. So you usually get a lot of indirect gains with neurofeedback, things you were not looking for, but the parents notice or the client notices. So fine motor skills is your C3, C4, C, of course, your sensory motor, which is tics and hyperactivity, and seizures and convulsions. Integration and processing of the information takes place there. So if you want the client to learn something, integrate it, process it, and send it to other areas of the brain, that's a good place to work on. That's a good place to train. C4 for calmness, emotion, and empathy. Remember, the right side of the brain is your social side. So you want the client to be more calm, to handle their emotions better, we want to have more empathy. That's a good side to train. Your P3, so P3, your left parietal lobe, this area right here, is good training for math. So if you have a client with math problems or problem-solving skills, P3 is the place to train. And usually people with dyscalculia or any kind of math problem or arithmetic or calculation problems, P3 would be a good place to train. So that's a good word for calculation. Now, good for complex grammar too. Attention and association. Your parietal cortex is your association cortex. Remember, it's where we receive all the stimuli from the environment, and then we send it to other areas of the brain. So if that area is dysregulated, we're not going to send the information to other areas of the brain as effectively as we want to. Okay? Now, the right side is good for spatial awareness. So if you have a client like myself who parks the car in a parking garage and it takes 45 minutes to find a car, that's a good side to train. It happens to me all the time. I park, and especially if I'm in a new place. So if I were to drive to here, in Taiwan, and I were to park the car, it would take me forever to find my car because I cannot locate myself for the life of me. Okay, so also the people who have trouble turning figures doing the spatial rotation, which is also me, that part of my brain is dead. So just geometry and math, forget it. So that is good to train. So it really helps with those conditions. So for the temporal lobes, again, the left side is memory and language. So if you have problems producing words or understanding words, the left side of the brain, T3, T5 is a good place to train. Anything that's verbally related, T3, T5. And you can use CZ to T3, CC to T5, or T3 to T5. You can do one channel or two channel training. Bipolar, monopolar, montage. It, again, depends on the client. The client is your expert. If you want to do two channels, go ahead and do two channels. And normally it will be the EEG that will tell us that information. Okay, the EEG will let us know whether we need just one channel or two channels, okay, as we will see in afternoon sessions. The right hemisphere for object recognition, music. So if you train with musicians and you want to improvise a music ability, T4, T6 is a good place to train. Social cues. Okay, so normally T6 is a hard spot for the kid who has to be yelled at to pay attention. Okay? So you go, Timmy, sit down. Come on, Timmy. You're distracting the class. I said, sit down, Timmy. So if the teacher or the parent has to yell at the client for them to sit down and pay attention. That's T6. So for inhibition, behavioral inhibition, CC to T6 is a good program. And that's the kind of kid who will do it just to get a rise out of the teacher, because he's the class clown. So the kids reinforce that, they'll do it. But if you want him to control their behavior, that's important. CC to T6 for behavioral inhibition. And social cues too. A lot of people who have problems socializing, CC to T6 is a good spot too. Because those are the clients who you ask them, so I take it you don't like to socialize a lot. You like more and more you find yourself going home and being alone. Yeah, I find people boring and stupid. I don't like hanging out with other people. And so when you train that, they get more social again. And then facial recognition. So visual and reading, it's good for the occipital lobes, but it's PC especially and OZ, it's good for anxiety as well. Because remember, PC and OZ, it's going to be our self-regulation hub. So if you have especially a lot of fast alpha, 10 hertz and above, anything fast, if you don't train at the occipital lobes, the anxiety is going to come down too. Okay. Now, visual processing problems, you will see. If you do a qEEG and there's a lot of slow brainwave activity, particularly alpha at the occipital lobes, you have to suspect a visual problem. So you send it to the ophthalmologist or the optometrist. Okay. Now, some clients I will send them, and yes, they're going to require prescription lessons. Some of them, the exams come up fine. Now, what that means is not an eye problem, it's a brain problem. We don't see with the eyes, we see with the brain. So it's the cortex is probably inflamed, or there's a kindled cortex, there's some inflammation going on. We can train and vision improves. And when you optimize alpha, a lot of people they get sharper vision. They report it. They see the colors more clearly, and the vision is not as blurry. So you can improvise on that, improve on that as well. And for learning disorders, parietal or occipital training, especially a lot of delta back here, it's good for learning disorders. And maturation lag too. So kids with maturational problems, PC or 102 is a good place to train. And you down train and suppress anything that's slow to help with that. So, for the left hemisphere, for sequencing and logic, attention to detail, speech, remembering words, reading, math, a sensation of flow, meaning things go my way and I can do things fluently and I can be diligent when I do it. And verbal memory, training left hemisphere is good for those functions. And for the right hemisphere, episodic memory, social skills. So T6 is a good one for social skills. T4 is a good one for social skills. Visual contact, so those people who talk to you but they look down, they don't look at you in the eye. That's a good. That's the right hemisphere for humor and empathy, for spatial awareness, intuition, and what is social memory, non-verbal memory. So especially memory that has to do with adverse experiences. The right brain, T6, T4, is a good. Sometimes F8 is a good place to train them too. And here's a nice one. So here you have your F1 and you have the Brodmann areas. You have F3 and you have the Brodmann areas. So this is a good breakdown of Brodmann areas by size. So maybe you can print and make a big poster out of this one. It's a very useful chart to use. And then again, the more you do it, you're not gonna need to refer this anymore because it's just gonna become second nature. It's like tying your shoes or driving a car. It's just gonna be there. Now, here we have it in a more detail manner. So, what do you train at FPC? You train 10, 11, and 32 for emotional inhibition, being oversensitive, impulsive, motivation, and attention. So, all those people who are quick to react. You tell them something and they think they're being personally attacked, they benefit from FPZ or FZ training. Those are the Brodmann areas and functions that you're training, okay? Now, FP1 is a good protocol, and I'm going to tell you this. A lot of people don't use it, but I found it to be very effective. So if you train FP1 with eyes closed, it's good for sleep. It's good I found it to be really useful for sleep. So what you do is you close the eyes, you put the sensor there, and you inhibit anything that's fast, beta, high beta, and you inhibit the delta too because you don't want it to make too much delta at the moment. And then you just don't reward anything, it's just suppress it. And you use relaxation music, relaxing music. So what you do is you set up an inhibit for the fast brainwave activity. So if the fast brainwave activity goes up, You can either stop the music or you can set up a tone, whichever way you feel better about it. Okay. Some people don't like the tone, they get too anxious, so I just stop the music. So they know that they're getting anxious when the music stops, and they relax and they do it again. And FP1 is very good because it's the access point to the amygdala and our limbic system. So by doing FP1, we're accessing those neuronal networks because the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system and the amygdala share connections. If the amygdala is too active, the prefrontal cortex cannot do anything well. So when you cool down the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex switches them. So by cooling down the amygdala, you're making sleep better. Because the limbic system, one of the functions the limbic system regulates is what? Sleep. Okay. So FP1 with eyes closed, it's wonderful. I love it. A lot of people, I do it with a lot of clients, and they sleep better after 3 sessions. They go, oh my God, I'm sleeping better. I hadn't slept this way in 20 years, and it's wonderful. Okay. Now for impulsiveness, for people who are really angry and really impulsive to react, FP1 is a good protocol tool. Because you're inhibiting that emotional overreactivity. Okay, so that's a good one. Now FP2, same thing but on the other side. You can do it for fear. And people with generalized anxiety disorder benefit a lot from FP2 training as well. Especially inhibiting and downtraining anything that's fast. Okay? Those people respond very well. And you use relaxing music. You know, if they're doing well and if the brain is doing what we want, the music keeps playing. If the brain goes the other way, you can set up a tone that goes ee, and they go, oh no, I need to relax, or simply just the music stops. Okay. So again, F7 is good for anything that's stuttering, stammering, tip of the tongue phenomena, talking with a lisp, anything that's motor language related. F7 is a good point, and T3 as well. F3, good for executive functions and depression. If there's an alpha asymmetry. If there's more alpha at F3, then we train at F3. If there's nothing at F3, we leave it alone. Okay. FC is good for anything that has to do with limbic output and anterior cingulate probes. So if you want to train OCD, FC is the place to go. If you want to train rage and anger issues, FC is the place to go. If you're talking to somebody who's really stubborn, you know, and really annoying, FC is the place to go. So FC is really good for anything where the person feels trapped in their mind and they feel stuck. And they cannot move forward in life. They're just in the same place. I've been angry for 20 years. I've been worried about things for 30 years. I don't want to do it anymore. So FZ is a good point. Okay, it's a good region of the brain to train for those things. So C3, C4, Z is anything that's motor related and sensory related. So we normally do CC to something else training for epilepsy, for absence seizures or epileptic form activity convulsions. Even if there's epileptic form activity that's not relating to a seizure disorder, CC to whatever the source of the epileptic form activity is, works. So if you want somebody, CC, let's start with CC. If you want your client to be calm and relaxed and cool and collected, CC is a good place to train. And what do you inhibit? Anything that's fast. What do you reward? 12 to 15. Neutral, positive perfusion. So want the client to just focus. Even for yourselves, if you can train yourselves, put the sensor at CC and do some training, and you'll find yourselves relaxing more and being more focused. You know, especially a lot of you which could be graduate students or undergraduate students, you know how it goes. It's very stressful, you go to bed late, and you need to focus, you have long days, long classes. CC is very good for that. And it helps with sleep too. So SMR type training, 12 to 15 at CC, suppressing any fast activity, it helps with sleep too. C3 and C4 are good for the mu type. If you have mu type ADHD, you're going to suppress the mu at C3 and C4. Now, a general wording here, which I think is valid and important. Sometimes you're going to do theta beta training at CZ with an ADD client, and they're not getting better, okay? Or they're getting worse. And the reason is that they could have mu. If you have mu at C3 and C4, or C3 or C4, do not reward 12 to 15. All right, that's a big no-no. If you have mu at C3 or C4, C3 and C4, do not reward 12 to 15, because that's only going to make the mu worse. Okay? So it's very important that you're doing CC or C3, C4 training for somebody who's ADD and they're getting worse or they're not getting better, that you look at the EEG to see if there's mu rhythm. Okay? And when we look at the EEGs, we're gonna see those, okay? It's very, 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 very important. So what you do is you target the mu. And mu usually is it's in the range of 10 to 11 hertz. That's usually the frequency, 10 to 11. So what you do, put a sensor on C3, put a sensor on C4, and you squash that mu. Okay? You don't touch anything else. Do not reward anything, just squash and downtrain the mu. Alright? That's very important to know. Because a lot of people, for a lot of people that happens, a lot of people who don't have qEEG equipment, and they start training because that's what the protocol says, they get worse. And when they get qEEG, or they send the client to do EEG or get a qEEG somewhere else, they find mu, and that's where it's going. Okay? So it's very tricky. Yes?
What's the reason for changing C3, C4, C3 to option the 12 to 15 can improve their sleep problem?
Because 12 to 15 is sleep spindles. When you're going through the phases of sleep, you go, you're going to start with the alpha, and the alpha starts fading away, you get to theta, and you get the K complex sleep spindles. Those are in the range of 12 to 15. And so it improves on your sleep because it optimizes that the transition between one phase and the other. Okay?
It's not related to the lack of exercise, but it's related to the frequency effect.
Right. It's got more to do with frequency. All right. So in the temporal lobes, again, T3 for migraines. If you have temporal lobe epilepsy and the source is T3, well, that's where you put the sensor. So let's assume we have a client with a T3 temporal lobe generator. The discharge occurs there. It goes CC, T3, 12 to 15. Okay. Now, with epilepsy or seizure disorders, you don't always have to place the sensor at the source of the problem, but it helps if you go that route. Okay. So T3, anything that's language related also. Okay, so stuttering, stammering, again, this forgetting the words, because that's an F7 to T3 though. That's the whole area that encompasses your broca, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. Now T3 and T4 for rage and for rage issues, anger management. T3 and T4 is very good. Okay. Normally you don't want to see alpha in the temporal lobes. Okay. So you have a lot of alpha in the temporal lobes, you have to suspect there's something going on there, and you get down training. For memory, T3 and T4, or for memory, CC and T5 as well. So if you go T3, T4, that's helpful for memory, or CC, T5 is helpful for memory, especially verbal memory things. Forgetting dates, forgetting facts, forgetting where I put my cell phone, where I put the keys to the car, I misplace my wallet with my stuff all the time. That's a good point to train as well. And again, T5 and T6 is good for emotional and behavioral regulation too. Okay. I had a police officer, police captain, who came to my office. You know, very rigid guy, because that's normally how they train them to be. You know, and he's got some trauma history. He's been in some shootouts, and he's been shot at, and different things. And the map clearly showed T5 to T6. And so he went to for the first session, and we did a video game. And the sister calls me saying, he doesn't want to go back again because he's doing children's play and he thinks he's doing mature. And I said, well, fine, we'll change training. We'll watch movies or something. But the interesting thing is that like 10 sessions later, he's smiling, he's talking to me, he's saying, this is fun, this is changing my life. You know, T5, T6. So it makes a huge difference when you know where to put the sensors into the trainers. Now this is somebody who has been rigid all their life, and within the first 10 sessions, you see a big, significant behavioral change. And the family was just more than thrilled too. So, you know, T5, T6 is good for that. T6 again, CC to T6 for emotional regulation. If you have that client who has to be yelled at, or you have to give them the dirty eye for them to behave, that's a good one. For PTSD, it's a good one too. You know, it's not. T6 is not diagnostically specific, but you will see some activity in anxiety or PTSD-related anxiety. So ZC to T6 is good for anxiety and or PTSD. And it also is not diagnostically specific, but you will see it in Asperger too. T6 will be highly active in Asperger. So for Asperger type symptoms or behaviors, CC, ZZ to T6 is a good protocol too. That's a good one too, okay? As far as the parietal goes, then P3, anything that is math related. So for those of us who for whom math is a nightmare, is a good thing. It's probably one of the reasons I went to study psychology, but there's no advanced math. And then you get into qEEG and you get linear math and algorithms, so there's no escaping it. But for those who struggle with math and also reading comprehension, P3 is a good one. So CC to P3, sometimes P3 to T5 is a good help for reading comprehension, reading memory, mathematics. And P4 for anything that's social or spatial awareness, things like that. PZ is going to be good for self-regulation, and then, as I was saying, your C4PC protocol for peak alpha frequency. Okay, so if you have a client with a lot of high beta or fast brainwave activity at PZ, you put the sensor there. You don't train anything that's fast. It helps them calm down. It's a very nice relaxing protocol. If you have a client with a lot of slow brainwave activity at PZ, then it's good for attention, maturation lag, learning disorders. You can do PZ or P3P4 or PCP3, PCP4. Again, it depends on what the EEG is showing, in part. Anything occipital is going to be good for visual problems and or anxiety as well. Anxiety clients will have a lot of alpha, especially past alpha at O1 and O2 or even OZ. So to reduce the anxiety and help with visual processing, occipital training is very recommended. This is the breakdown for the broken areas. I think that information will greatly help you because it really breaks it down for you. So what you do is you buy yourselves one of these. You can buy it on Amazon for, this one cost me about $100. It's not really expensive, and it's good to have it because you can explain to clients. You open it and show the areas and show the functions. It's very useful, and people get a good understanding for it. And then you can study the different Brodmann areas and functions. And as you explain to the client or as you lecture, it really helps you out, okay? So I think that's very good information. Let's see what we have. So, okay, so this is what it would look like with Loretta and Estoreta, which we're going to look at later. So this is the prefrontal cortex, and here's your activity. So the red dots mean that's the problematic network. Okay, that's where the algorithm is finding to be the problematic area of the brain. Now, it's significant because, oops. Okay. So, do you see that here? If I'm getting away, I'm sorry. So this is your corpus callosum. This is your corpus callosum. See that? Okay. This area of the brain, meaning this area of the brain, is the dorsal section of your anterior cingulate cortex. And this area right here, which is the one in red, is your ventral section. Anything that's dorsal, it's cognitive processing. Anything that's ventral, it's emotional processing. Okay? So this is your cognitive processing hub. This is your emotional and affective processing hub. This is the Loretta map for somebody with depression. Look at that. It's the affective processing center that's not working well in the anterior cingulate cortex. Okay? For some people, it will light up here and it will light up here. So it means I think, therefore I get upset. I think, therefore I get obsessed. I think, therefore I get depressed. Okay? So for this person, the depression is more on the emotional and affective side of things. There's not a whole lot of cognitive processing going on, but the affective regulation is the most salient and problematic area. Okay? So what does the prefrontal cortex do? The duration of the focus. It helps us persevere. Okay? It helps us be motivated. If we're not doing well, we want to persevere. It helps us judge. It helps us with impulse control, with self-monitoring and supervision, meaning maybe I'm being inadequate. Maybe I should not say this in front of this person. It's good with problem solving, critical thinking, learning from experience, and that's why teenagers get into so much trouble, because their prefrontal cortex is not mature enough. So that's why they jump out of a building without a parachute, and they use drugs, and they engage in sexual activity early in life, and end up getting an STD or being pregnant, things like that. The ability to feel and express emotion, and it interacts with the limbic system. That's very important, because there's something called the hijacking. And what that means is that when your limbic system is overactive, it hijacks the frontal cortex. So out the window goes thinking clearly, calming down, acting rationally. All right? So whenever you have somebody with anger management issues, somebody with impulse control problems, it means their limbic system is hijacking the prefrontal cortex. All right? It's important empathy. And that's why psychopaths can do what they do, because they feel no empathy. They don't feel sorry for anything they do. No? So it's one of the key features of psychopathy and antisocial disorder. So if we have problems with the prefrontal cortex, we have a short attention span. So you're talking to somebody, they go, "What was that? Can you say that again?" And it happens several times. You get distracted. You don't persevere. You get unmotivated. Go on. And ADD is a feature. ADD people, their problem is not that they cannot focus. The problem is that they don't know what to focus on. Because the brain, for them, is paying attention to everything that is going on at the same time. So when you're being bombarded with stimuli, and you don't know what to pay attention to, well, you're going to pay attention to everything. So what happens is that after a while, they give up. It's not that they don't try. And one of the labels for ADD people is that they're lazy. It's not that they're lazy, they do try. It's just that after a while of being able to achieve things, they just give up. They go, no, I'm not going to try anymore. It's not, I can't focus, I can't do it, I'm not going to try. But they do try, and very hard. and they pay the price for it. Okay? Poor time management, so being late. This is the kind of client who has an appointment at 10 a.m. and they wake up at 4 in the morning and they still manage to arrive at 11 a.m. to the appointment. They wake up super early with the very intention of getting there early, and they don't. So it's a client who's late. It's the kind of client you're going to get that's late to every appointment. Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm late again. Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm late again. Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm late again. So, poor time management. Disorganized, both physically and mentally. So it's the kind of client who, in their company, their workstation is the messiest. There's papers everywhere. There's the computer is on. They're talking on the phone, and they have the computer on. And there's a pile of papers over here, and they have to look for that receipt. They have to toss the office around to find it. Okay, they procrastinate. So they go, I'll do it later, I'll do it later, I'll do it later, I'll do it later. There's lack of emotion, so psychopathy, flat affect. If there's new rhythm, you're going to see lack of emotion because that's a disengagement of the prefrontal cortex. So if there's new rhythm, you're going to see people with flat affect. For judgment, again, problems learning from experience, problems with short-term memory, social anxiety, and test anxiety. This is a client who is at school or college, and they study very hard, and they prepare diligently, and they do their very best to pass that test. And when they sit down, the anxiety hits in, they forget everything, and they execute poorly. And it's the kind of client who tells you, I studied very hard, and when I sat down to take the test, I forgot everything. So here's a clear example of an EEG with a dysregulation of the prefrontal cortex, some theta rhythm, fast alpha rhythm going on, and then we'll read that later. Don't worry about that. It's just to show you. And that's the hypercoherence. There's hypercoherence in the EEG, frontal to occipital, and those are the maps for hypercoherence, which shows it here at a fast alpha rhythm. The frontal part of the brain and the occipital part of the brain are not talking to each other. They're not taking turns. The front of the brain and the part of the brain are supposed to take turns, managing the information. And here it is not taking turns. So it's the front and the back of the brain fighting for control. So the limbic system creates the emotional color and sets the emotional tone of the mind. Labels events as internally important. So this is every memory, specifically traumatic memories that you have had, this is where they get stored. So every time you react out of emotion is because you are reacting out of your limbic system. Okay. Control sleep and appetite. And that's the reason why when you're stressed, you don't eat a fruit salad. You go for that McDonald's Happy Meal. Those McNuggets or whatever it is that you have in front of you that looks really tasty, that is very bad for you, but you eat it. It's because of the cortisol, that's the output from the cortisol and the activation of the limbic system. It promotes bone bonding. So when we lose a loved one and we feel the pain, it's the limbic system telling us that. Controls smell and modulates libido, which is your sexual drive. So in people who are dissociated or highly stressed out, their sexual drive goes down. And I see a lot of couples when I do the assessment, and the people, and either the husband or the wife has a limbic system problem, their sexual drive is very low, which is causing distress in the relationship. So what happens if our limbic system is not working the way we want to? We have mood changes, we have clinical depression, we have irritability, we're flooded with negative thoughts all the time. Life is hard, very stupid, it's not fair, the world's gonna end, I should just die because it's not worth it, things like that. A negative perception of the world, lack of motivation, negative emotions, a sleep and appetite disruption. So I either lose weight or I gain a lot of weight. I sleep too much or I sleep too little. I either have too much sex or I don't want any sex at all. And I withdraw socially. I don't want any friends. I don't want anybody talking to me. Leave me alone. Basal ganglia, very important for anxiety. Okay? And that's probably the generator of a lot of the beta rhythms. Okay? So, integrate sense of movement. So it's involved in hyperactivity. Basal ganglia will be involved in hyperactivity. So SMR, it's one of the networks that SMR enhances, basal ganglia. So that we can have a kid who goes from being hyperactive to a kid who can sit down and do their homework. So if we have an unhealthy basal ganglia, we're going to have anxiety and nervousness. It's involved in panic attacks. Those clients who always are thinking that something bad's going to happen. Something that's going to happen. Something that's going to happen. Something that's going to happen. And all of those things. The cingulate cortex, again, for anything that has to do with flexibility. Okay, so it's the ability to shift focus. If I get stuck in one thought, it's my anterior, my ACC, my anterior cingulate cortex. That's not doing the job properly. If I'm stubborn, if I cannot adapt, so you know, it's as if I. All right, so you know, if I come here and I don't want to adapt to the culture, you know, if you tell me we start working at 5 in the morning, I go, no, I'm going to start working at 8. You know, it's problems with that. It's adapting to new environments, adapting to new ways of saying things, and, you know, even adapting to the food or so, things like that. So, the ability to see options. So this is the type of person who sees just one option. It's the way I do it. There's no other way. I'm right, you're wrong. Okay? So there's no ability to see other options to do things differently. So we get chronic worrying or fretting. Okay? So the person dwells on a thought over and over again. Holding on to the past. This one is important for couples. So if you're going to do couples therapy with neurofeedback, this is a big one. Okay? It's the couple, the husband or the wife who's constantly repeating things from the past. Okay? Being-stuck in certain behaviors, oppositional defiant disorder, being argumentative, say no automatically, is involved in addictions, chronic pain, again your fibromyalgia and neuropathies, eating disorders, and road rage. So I'm driving, somebody cuts me off, and I go chase them until I drive them off the road. When I cut them off, I get out of my car, and I want to fight them. Okay. And here's a pattern for FC. It's a healthy, active, overactive, anterior cingulate cortex. And this is what it looks like. See it right there? So there's your theta and your alpha, and that's what the topography looks like. Overactive limbic system. That's what Loretta would look like for this case. And there's S Loretta, and that's just Loretta. So it's the software can be really accurate and it can help us predict. Temporal lobes. Language comprehension and processing, long-term memory, and emotional stability. So those clients with rage issues, you know, benefit from temporal lobe. Okay? If you have a client with extreme rage, you need and violent thoughts. Let me use the microphone. That's the extreme. I don't think it's Hello? Okay, here we go. So if you have a client who has violent thoughts and images of violence, it's very important that they go for an MRI or a CAT scan, because it could be the sign of a brain tumor. Okay? So clients with a lot of violent thoughts and images